Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I want to tell you a story about a country you might think you know, Luxembourg. It's often described as one of the richest nations in the world, home to international banks, European institutions, and some of the highest incomes per person anywhere. On paper, it's a shining success story. But behind that image is a reality that might surprise you. Luxembourg also has one of the highest poverty rates in Europe. How can a place so rich also be a place where so many struggle to make ends meet? That's what we're going to explore today. We'll look at the numbers, the families behind them, the reasons poverty exists in such a wealthy nation, and what that tells us about inequality everywhere. Let's start with the headline figure. About 18% of Luxembourg's population lives in poverty. That's nearly 1 in 5 people. Imagine walking down a street in Luxembourg City. In every group of 5 people you pass, statistically, 1 is poor. What makes this even more striking is that half of those poor are working. They're not unemployed, not sitting at home. They're waiters, cleaners, bus drivers, office assistants, shop clerks, construction workers, people who show up every day, do their jobs, and still can't cover the cost of living. That makes Luxembourg one of the worst in Europe for what's called the working poor. Certain families are hit especially hard. Single parents top the list. 42% of them live in poverty. That's almost half. Think of Sophie, a single mother raising 2 children while working full-time in a supermarket. Her rent takes more than half her salary. After bills, there's barely enough for food, clothes, or school activities. She's doing everything society asks of her, and still she's struggling. Large families are another group at risk. 40% of families with 3 or more children live in poverty. Picture Mark and Isabel raising 4 kids. They both work, 1 in construction, 1 in childcare. Their income looks decent until you divide it across 6 people. Suddenly, there isn't enough for bigger housing, school materials, sports, and food. The more children, the more costs, and wages don't stretch far enough. Retirees, on the other hand, are somewhat shielded. Only about 10% of pensioners are poor, thanks to strong pensions that keep incomes close to what they were before retirement. That creates an unusual dynamic. Older people often fare better than young families with children. So why does poverty look like this in Luxembourg? One of the biggest reasons is housing. The country has some of the most expensive housing markets in Europe. Over the past 2 decades, prices have exploded. Renting a modest apartment can swallow more than half a household's income. Buying a home is out of reach for many working families. When housing costs rise faster than wages, poverty follows. The labor market is another factor. Luxembourg is small but attracts more than 200,000 cross-border workers every day from France, Belgium, and Germany. They're essential to the economy, but their numbers also keep wages low in some sectors. Jobs in retail, cleaning, and construction don't pay enough to match the high cost of living. So even full-time workers often struggle. And then there's the family structure issue. Single parents lack a second income to share expenses. Large families face multiplied costs. Benefits exist, but they rarely cover the gap created by high rent, childcare, and daily essentials. Now let's think about what poverty actually means in Luxembourg. It's not about lacking electricity or water. It's about struggling to participate fully in society. Maybe you can't afford reliable internet at home and your children fall behind in school. Maybe you can't buy public transport passes for all your kids, so they miss out on activities. Maybe you avoid going to the doctor because of the fees. Poverty in a rich country often looks invisible from the outside, but for those living it, it's a constant battle. The psychological impact is huge. Living in poverty while surrounded by wealth can feel isolating. Imagine being a teenager whose classmates go on ski trips or wear the latest clothes while you can't afford those things. You start to feel left out, embarrassed, excluded. That stress carries into adulthood. It's not just about money. It's about dignity, self-esteem, and belonging. Children are especially vulnerable. Families with fewer resources often can't pay for tutoring, extra lessons, or extracurricular activities. Parents juggling multiple jobs may not have time to help with homework. Over time, those disadvantages add up, pushing children into lower academic tracks and limiting their career opportunities. Poverty today often means poverty tomorrow, passed down from one generation to the next. Health is another consequence. Stress from financial strain weakens mental and physical well-being. Poor families may delay medical appointments, buy cheaper but less nutritious food, or live in cramped housing. Over the years, that leads to worse health outcomes. Poverty literally shortens lives. So how does Luxembourg compare to its neighbors? Countries like France, Belgium, and Germany also have poverty, but their rates are lower, closer to 15%. Luxembourg's 18% stands out, and not just because of the number. The contrast between national wealth and individual struggle makes it more visible. In Luxembourg, the divide between the wealthy, often bankers, lawyers, or EU staff, and lower-income workers is stark. Sometimes you'll see luxury apartments right next to crowded housing. Children may sit in the same classroom but come from households worlds apart in resources. Luxembourg does have social programs, child allowances, housing subsidies, health coverage. These help, but they don't fully solve the problem. When rent is sky-high, a subsidy barely makes a difference. When childcare is expensive, single parents still can't balance everything. Social support is present, but it often feels like patching a hole in a sinking boat. This raises questions for Luxembourg's future. If nearly 1 in 5 people is poor, if so many children grow up disadvantaged, what happens in 20 years? How does that shape the workforce, the education system, and the sense of unity in society? A wealthy country can't afford to ignore inequality because inequality eventually touches everyone. At the same time, Luxembourg's story is a mirror for many wealthy societies. It reminds us that national averages can hide deep divisions. A high GDP per capita doesn't mean everyone thrives. Work doesn't always protect from poverty. And children who grow up excluded often carry those scars into adulthood. So what can be done? Some answers are clear. Building more affordable housing would directly relieve families under pressure. Raising wages in low-income sectors would reward work with dignity. Strengthening benefits for single parents and large families would help the most vulnerable. None of these changes are simple, but they are possible. Beyond policy, there's also the cultural step of acknowledging poverty. In rich countries, people often assume it doesn't exist or that it's the result of laziness. But when the majority of poor people are working, that myth falls apart. Poverty is not a personal failure, it's a structural issue. Recognizing that is the first step towards solving it. As we come to the end of this story, let's return to the families we imagined. Sophie, the single mother, doing her best to raise her children on a supermarket wage. Mark and Isabel, working hard but struggling to support 4 kids in an expensive city. These are not rare cases. They represent thousands of families in Luxembourg who live in the shadow of wealth. Luxembourg's paradox, incredible national prosperity alongside deep personal struggle, forces us to ask bigger questions. What do we mean by success? Is it enough to measure prosperity by averages, or should we measure it by how the most vulnerable are doing? Shouldn't true wealth mean that everyone, not just the top, can live with dignity and security? The lesson from Luxembourg is simple but powerful. Poverty is not just a problem for poor countries. It's a challenge for all societies. Even the richest nations must ask themselves whether prosperity is shared fairly. If 1 in 5 people in the richest country in Europe can't make ends meet, then we all need to rethink how we define progress. So the next time you hear about Luxembourg's wealth, remember the other side of the story. Remember the families working hard but falling short, the children missing out on opportunities, the parents weighed down by impossible choices. Remember that true wealth isn't just about numbers. It's about people. Thank you for staying with me through this exploration. I hope it gives you a deeper understanding of Luxembourg and of inequality more broadly. If it resonated with you, share it with someone else. These conversations matter because behind every statistic are real lives. And in the end, the way we care for those lives is the true measure of prosperity.